Spurgeon here with RevZilla, and in this video we're going to break down the all-new Shoei RF-1400 helmet available at RevZilla.com. So what you're going to see on the table in front of me is the outgoing RF-1200 and the all-new RF-1400. You have to understand the backstory here to understand why this helmet change is so important. About 7 years ago, Shoei introduced the RF-1200, and this was a landmark helmet when it came out. It really ushered in a new era of premium for helmets. It was one of the lightest helmets we had seen. It really made Pinlock a standard offering, and really when we looked at this, it was sub $500. It was premium in hand and craft. It was one of the best-selling helmets we saw for years. It made Gear Guides 3 years in a row running, and even after that, after it was no longer in Gear Guides, it was still a main talking point because there were so many times where if we had a contender come up, we would say, well, how does it measure against the RF-1200? It might not be as good, but here's a new helmet to consider. Maybe it's as good, but really this has been the benchmark helmet for how we rate so many newcomers over the past 7 years. So how does Shoei go about changing and updating such a revolutionary helmet? Very carefully. And that's what you're going to see with the RF-1400. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to break down all the updates and changes that you're going to see between the two, and we're going to give you our thoughts on really how that correlates to the helmet's performance itself. So let's start off with just the basics. The price on this is going to come in around $499. So we might as well just round up to that $500 mark, but we're not seeing a huge price increase in solid colors. The outgoing helmet's around $485, so really the price isn't increasing too much, roughly about $15. The shell construction itself has stayed the same. It's that AIM Plus shell, which is the advanced integrated Matrix Plus shell from Shoei. That's their material that they proprietarily hold the knowledge on, but it is really the same construction that we saw with the RF-14 or the RF-1200. So no real changes there. Same with the shell sizes. So there's 4 different shell sizes, and the advantage with having so many different shell sizes is that smaller helmets look smaller and fit smaller if you are a smaller person, and larger helmets then scale up in size. It also helps to reduce weight on the lower end of the spectrum, so you're not using an extra large shell on a small helmet. So the shell size breakdown runs from extra small for the first one, then an independent shell for medium, independent shell for large, and then extra large 2XL gets its own shell size. DOT, it is now Snell 2020. So Snell 2020 rating on this, 3 pounds, 9 ounces in a medium. Now, if you are an RF-1200 rider, you're familiar with the outgoing helmet, it is a 3-ounce increase. So we asked Shoei, where did the added weight come from? Their real answer was they've reinforced the EPS liner on the side of the head for better impact protection. And what you'll notice as we work our way through this, the cheeks are going to feel a bit snugger. Now, part of that is the contour to the cheek pad, but also part of that is the fact that they have beefed up the side protection on this particular helmet. So a 3-ounce increase. Now, how that translates to the helmet, we'll get to that in 1 second. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the outgoing RF-1200, the actual fit stays the same. Intermediate oval, a little bit longer front to back, narrow down the side of the head. What we loved about the RF-1200 is that it fits like 80% of the population. People would call on the CS and they would say, I just need a great all-around helmet and I need it to fit right out of the box. 99% of the time, they're going to get a recommendation to at least check out and try on the RF-1200. And 80% of the time, it really worked. It is going to work for the majority of the riders out there in the American market, and that's one of the reasons it's become so popular. So Shoei did adjust the fit a bit as it sits around the cheek pads. It is going to be a little bit snugger to get the helmet on and off. Once you have the helmet on, it's going to sit really snug against your cheeks. It actually makes it more comfortable when you're riding. You don't feel like the helmet's flexing around on you as much. If you're not sure exactly how to size a helmet, check out our How to Size and Buy a Motorcycle Helmet Buying Guide. Really, you need the helmet to fit nice and snug on your cheeks. We always used to say, it's like when Edna comes to town and she starts to really pinch your cheeks. So if you're not sure exactly how a helmet should fit, make sure you check that out because it does become important when we talk about the actual fit changes to this particular lid. So I mentioned earlier about the weight change. So let's break that down right now when it comes to the aerodynamics. So Shoei has made the helmet more aerodynamic. According to their claims, they reduced drag by 4% and they reduced lift by 6%. So even though it's got a 3-ounce weight change, it actually feels a bit lighter. What I can tell you is, riding in this helmet, we've got about a week of riding in because we've just got our samples. you can ride all day and it does not feel heavier out on the road. And the example I'll give you too is that the Shoei VFX Evo on the dirt side of things is almost 4 pounds. And out of all the dirt helmets I've used, that's actually my favorite go-to. So Shoei does do a good job of making the helmets, even though when you throw them on a scale, they look heavy. On paper, they do translate to a bit of a lighter feel when they're out on the road. And a lot of that, again, is going to come to the aerodynamic change. You can see, even just looking at this from a profile side point, the back spoiler has kind of slimmed down a little bit. It is a bit more aerodynamic there. And the big change you're going to notice as we talk about the vents is the front vent has changed as well. So you no longer have this little area right here, which kind of creates friction with the wind flow over top. They've gone to more of this slider design, something very similar to what we've seen on like the GT Air 2 or the Neotech 2, and that makes it a lot easier to use. So while we're talking about the vents, one of the critiques that was out on the RF-1200 was the airflow. So not only was the airflow not superb, but once you opened, or to get these open, these two sliders on the side were super easy, but it was really kind of a pain in the butt to slide this back and forth, especially with motorcycle gloves on while you're riding. You could never tell which way was open, which way was closed. They've simplified the design on the new helmet, and this is very similar to what you would see on the GT Air 2 or the Neotech 2. It's very easy to feel if the vents are open or closed, especially if you have gloves on. The other thing that they've done is they've increased the vents. So you're going to see they've gone to 2 openings on the top on this, helps to push airflow through on the front end, and then they've increased the exhaust vent by nearly 50%. So that air that's pushing through from the front has a much easier way of escaping. Now the one thing to note here is that the vent used to be an active vent, which means in colder weather you could close that off. Again, part of the problem was, and I've talked to a lot of riders that have used the RF-1200, and one of their main complaints was it was really hard to figure out whether the vent was open or closed, especially if you were riding, just by reaching around and feeling that. There wasn't a real progressive way of saying, okay, cool, that is clicked open, that is clicked closed. It was just kind of a crapshoot in trying to feel what position it was in. So with this new one, it is a passive vent, which means it's open all the time. Not something that's a huge concern for me, because even if you're riding in colder weather, you can close the front vents, and that's where the air is pushing in. But just something to note that this vent on the back is now passive, but it is a lot larger, which will help for riding in the summer months. Now, taking a look at the front, you're going to notice that the change for this, for the front vent, is twofold. One, the vent design has changed a little bit, and you kind of push it down to open it up. Now, even as I was doing that, the one thing to note here is that they've changed and they've pushed the face shield opening to a button design in the front. This is something that I don't love. I've kind of critiqued this on some other helmets that we've used. Some of the other helmets actually have a better design. If you're looking at something like the AGV K6, it's more of a clear push, click, pop open. With this, it's a little bit trickier to get it open. It's not really a push. You have to kind of push in. It doesn't pop up. You have to push in and then kind of push the visor up. It just makes it complicated a little bit when you're trying to either open the vent in the front or push this open. The old one had a clear design over on the side where you just kind of pushed the latch up, pulled it up, and it went. So just keep in mind, this is now a center release. You have to push in and pull up. As far as the detents are concerned, there's nice solid detents with this as it works its way up. That was one of the questions that I saw come in on the Common Tread article that we did. And then when you open it to the full position, it does lock into that wide open position. Now the face shield story here is another one of the major changes. They've actually improved the face shield quite a bit. It's now a CWR-F2 face shield. They've taken a lot of the technology from their 14 line that Marquez has been using. And what you're going to see here are the little vortex generators over on the face shield, again, to help spoil the air. That adds with the aerodynamics. The other thing you'll note is the pin lock insert is now much larger, about a 10% increase on the pin lock insert. If you're not familiar, pin lock is a little liner, basically, that sits on the inside of the face shield. Comes standard in the box on this particular helmet. And when you insert it, it helps in colder temperatures or just general fogging. So if you're breathing heavy, your helmet's all sealed up in a cold morning, you don't worry about the fogging on the inside of the face shield. So they've improved the line of vision. So when you're using the face shield itself, it's much easier to see out without any kind of distortion in your peripheral. And it is a vast improvement over the previous version. Now, the other thing you'll note too as we open this up is that while the design for getting the visor on and off is the same, you have this little lever, this pulls down and it pops off. You'll notice this little switch here. This was on the previous version, but it was actually like a screw head that you had to turn. You can actually switch this, and it pulls the face shield in snugger to the actual gasket itself, so that is adjustable, and you can get a fine fitment for how that's going to work for the gasket on your helmet. The gasket we like, while the previous version was a one-piece gasket, this is a bit improved, and the actual sealing up around the face shield, there's no gaps. We like to take like a little post-it note and try to run it in there and see if there's any gaps along the gasket. We could find none. So we really like the redesign of the face shield on this helmet quite a bit, with the exception of that center release. That's not something that I think is going to be favorable for a lot of people, just especially if you're trying to do that with motorcycle gloves on. But again, minor nitpick for all the positives that we did see with the actual face shield redesign itself. Now, when we're taking a look at the side of this, one of the things you're going to note is that on the side of the helmet itself, this is a kind of a redesign. You're going to have this padding down at the side. So this is, again, part of the reason that Shoei was talking about, where they've redesigned the actual sides of the helmet with the EPS, a little bit of extra EPS that works its way down here. So from a protection standpoint, Shoei's telling you that this is, a little bit of added benefit for the side of the head. The downside here is that it makes it, and you can see even the gasket on this one kind of pulled out a little bit where we're installing a comm system. It makes it a bit trickier to install a clamp mount comm system. You can do it, but it's going to put a little bit of pressure on this, and you're probably going to kind of feel that pushing against the left cheek pad a little bit. So just keep that in mind. One of our nitpicks really here is that you're going to have to use a sticky mount. Now, Shoei is going to have a little adapter mount that you can mount your comm system to, but if you're trying to just regularly use your clamp system, you can get it in there. It's just not going to be the smoothest solution possible, if you will. So just keep that in mind as we work our way down to the bottom on this. This is where we're going to get into some of that increased noise reduction, is what Shoei's claiming. Now, let's just throw this out in the open. I think noise reduction is something that is very specific to individual riders. One of the biggest questions we get is the helmet quieter? Is this helmet any noisier? It's subjective. I mean, helmet noise doesn't bother me at all. I can go out on the highway. I'm usually using earplugs. So helmet noise is something that I can't say, for a fact, you're going to find this particular helmet quieter. What I can tell you is that with us riding in it, the RF-1400 is no quieter than the RF-1200. I'm not going to say it's noisier, but it's definitely not quieter. Now, the one thing to note here is to maximize the helmet to be as quiet as you want. It is designed to be used with this chin skirt, okay? Personally, I don't like a chin skirt. It makes it a little bit trickier to get in and out of the helmet. I remove it. It is completely removable. But for those of you out there that are trying to reduce as much noise as possible, you're going to want to use the helmet with this installed. Now, the other thing you'll note, and I'm just going to hold this up very quickly, is you are going to see the design on the bottom of this has changed. You're going to have a snugger fit. This is that contour of the cheek pad, which is definitely more padding, works its way for a better seal around the bottom of the helmet, so you're going to have less airflow pushing up from the bottom. Now, what that means for you, again, when you're getting this helmet on, you're going to have to pull it apart a little bit harder with that chin strap to be able to get in and out. But once you have it on, you are going to note that the cheek pads are going to be a little bit snugger than what you had with the previous version of the RF-1200. We like that a lot. Once you have the helmet on, it's a much more comfortable helmet. There's a better contour to the cheek pad. You have less airflow pushing up from below. So it is going to be a slightly snugger fit, but it's going to be better when you're rolling down the highway. It's going to help to hold the helmet in place just that much better. There's no change to the internal crown, and that's really where you get the sizing. So you are going to still have the quick release emergency cheek pad system. So if you need to pull this out, you can. In an emergency and a crash, EMTs can get that out right away. Taking a look at the inside of this, again, you're not going to see anything crazy with this. It's going to be the same in top to liner. The main changes that we saw were with those cheek pads there. And then taking a look at the vents, you're going to see that improved venting system or the improved venting scheme. Now, while it doesn't look like there are cutouts or channels for airflow, which is something I would normally nick a helmet for, they're actually behind the first layer of EPS. So all those little holes and channels and where those vents come in, it actually runs through a hidden layer, and then the airflow pushes out through those holes that you can see cut into the EPS liner there, and then it goes to that larger exhaust vent out back. So again, small refinements that we're going to see across the board, but it does help make the helmet a little bit, more ventilated. Now on the side here, You're going to have the removable pods for the speaker cutouts. You'll see that right there. And again, that's something that really, when we saw the RF-1200 introduced, they were one of the first helmets to standardize this. A lot of the stuff that we look at now is speaker cutouts and pin lock included in the box. That didn't exist 8 or 9 years ago. That was something that really, when Shoei brought this to the table, they were leading the charge with a lot of these revolutions, or a lot of these evolutions, and it really continues into this helmet. So, final thoughts. I would say that this is not the same revolutionary helmet that we saw with the RF-1200. It really didn't break the mold, but I didn't have to. The RF-1200 is still to this day one of the best-selling helmets on the market, and they didn't want to alienate those people. It's like going to buy a pair of Levi's, and then a year later you go to buy a pair of Levi's, and for whatever stupid reason, Levi's has completely changed the fit and the design of that favorite pair of jeans you have. Shoei didn't want to do that. So what they did was they took the RF-1200 and they addressed some of the issues that riders have had with it. Now, I think that some fair critiques here would be the button at the front of the face shield, the fact that it did get slightly heavier, and I know that Shoei claimed that part of that weight was adding to the EPS. I would have assumed that they would be able to at least keep the weight the same or maybe reduce it a little bit, but then you can look at some of the pros. The aerodynamics have improved. The helmet feels more stable while you're riding. Those cheek pads do make it more comfortable and contoured to ride in. The venting is vastly improved, and even as we look at some of the other helmets in this category, that $500 price point, the venting on this one is now some of the best. So I think the real too long didn't read of this is if you are an RF-1200 user and your helmet is getting a little bit long in the tooth and you want to upgrade, I think you're going to be very comfortable in an RF-1400. It's going to feel like home, but maybe a slightly nicer home. Maybe somebody has come in and cleaned your home. And if you're someone that's currently riding in a less pristine helmet, maybe you're riding in something that was your first helmet and you want to upgrade to something a bit more premium, I think this is still going to be an amazing option. It is still going to be that benchmark helmet in which we measure a lot of other helmets by, because it is built on the foundations of a helmet that has been a favorite of ours for so long. Now, there's a lot of riders out there utilizing RF-1200s and RF-1400s, and I would encourage you to read other rider reviews from folks that are out there putting this helmet through its paces. If you have any questions for us as to which helmet is right for you and your riding style, reach out to one of our Gear Geeks at 877-792-9455 or shoot an email over to cs@RevZilla.com. I want to thank you for joining us for this detailed breakdown look at the new Shoei RF-1400. I'm Spurge. Enjoy the ride.